Hi, everybody. I'm Sunny, and this is We Gotta Talk, a live weekly digital talk show and podcast where we like to dig deep. Real talk, big topics. Now, let's dig in. Okay, hey everybody, and welcome to We Gotta Talk. If you're watching live, welcome to the stream. If you're listening, thank you for being here. And if you're listening on the podcast, you've heard a little bit about our guest today already. She writes so beautifully on a topic that is so common and rote and yet so difficult and complex. And if you're a mom, you know it's true. We're talking about motherhood today, but not just motherhood generally speaking, but her specific journey when it came to welcoming her twins into the world early, 22 weeks pregnant early. So Laura Diaz Freeland is the author of the book, Not What I Had in Mind. It is available on pre-order on Amazon right now, and we'll include a link in show notes. But this is her, what she calls Motherhood Origin Story. And I just wrapped up reading before the interview, and it has been such a pleasure to read Laura's words, and I cannot wait to bring her on and talk all about her journey with motherhood and all of the advice she has for other moms out there. Laura, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sunny.
We should tell everyone, Laura so graciously dropped off a copy of this book to my house, was promptly attacked by my dog. And I had half of my hair up and half of my hair. I was on an emergency call that I wasn't expecting. So Laura, thank you for your graciousness in coming back, even though I should have scared you away.
Oh my gosh. Nothing can scare me after what I've been through.
You know what? Well put, girl. And let's dive right in. I said a little bit of this in the intro, but there are moms, and then there are moms, like badass moms. You were indoctrinated or inducted, I guess is the right word, into the role of mother in a very stressful and intense way. Tell us about how it all started, that moment you went into labor with your twins early.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting to even talk about it from this perspective because I know so much more now than I knew then. So then when I was 22 weeks and 4 days pregnant when I was admitted to the hospital, and I thought I cannot be in labor. Like this simply cannot be. This has to be fake. But as soon as I was admitted to triage, they started administering medications that told me, oh, like I am in labor. And even with as little as I knew at that point, I don't think I actually did not write this in the book, but I looked at my mom just a few hours before my baby Vivian was born. And I said, Mom, the babies are going to be born and they're going to die, because it was not fathomable to me that they would live 22 weeks. And at that point it was 5 days, right? Was not like a viable. If you searched the internet for that, you didn't find like twins at that point. Now you do, but that's a whole other part of the conversation. Yeah, so that's how it started, right? I threw up and a baby came out, and to not give too much away, the next baby was born 2 days later via emergency C-section, and we spent 7.5 months in the NICU, most of that time wondering, like, are we going to leave with our daughters or not?
You talk about the specifics of delivering early, and there are a lot of details that people who have been fortunate enough to go full term would not know. And one of them to me that was new to me, one of those facts was that there is discussion sometimes between the doctors and nurses about whether or not you want to try to help your baby survive. It was a gut punch reading it, Laura. I can't imagine living it. These decisions are being put in the hands of mothers in distress. Of course, a mother, I would guess, is going to say, do everything you can to save this child. But were you aware that that would even have been a point of discussion going into this labor?
No. Yeah, I had no idea the complexities of the conversation, and that like hospitals with level 3 and level 4 NICUs have like ethics committees to make decisions about whether or not they will offer intervention at that stage of pregnancy, but also that on the line at 22 and 23 weeks. Some hospitals, depending on their outcomes, will not give you a choice at 23 weeks because like their outcomes are so good. I don't think don't quote me on that, but 23 weeks, if the hospital has really good outcomes, you may not have a choice. But at 22 weeks, you as a parent birthing in a hospital that intervenes, so that's like a caveat here, will be given a choice. Do you want intervention or do you want to let your child just pass peacefully? Now, if you are at a hospital that does not offer intervention, which is about it's not that easy to find statistics because nobody wants to talk about this unpleasant topic, but I would venture to say it's about half the country's hospitals do not offer intervention, not just because of the moral issue, but because they are not capable.
They don't have the equipment and the training for their doctors
and
necessary.
The protocols.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
And so but the issue, well, I see it as an issue, right, is that you as a birthing parent in that hospital are told there's nothing that can be done. Your baby is not viable. You can just hold them while they pass away. You will not be told, oh, well, if you were in Iowa or in Japan or at Winnie Palmer Hospital in Orlando, Florida, they would be able to intervene, and they have survival rates with like good, healthy, thriving outcomes of like 50 or 60 or 84%. They won't tell you that if you're having your child at a hospital that doesn't intervene. They'll just tell you they're not viable. They won't survive.
Which is an awful thing to tell a parent, especially a mother who is in active labor and going through the stress of realizing that this is weeks, months early.
Right.
Laura,
Which I'm not told that, right? So I was at Winnie Palmer
Right.
Hospital in Orlando. That's a very unique team that dedicates themselves to this. But if I had been in a different situation, it could have turned out very differently.
I know it's going to be hard. You put it into words so eloquently in the book, and you really have a knack for bringing a moment to life. But for those who haven't read it yet, I would love for you to just take us into your mind and your heart space in those first few moments when you realize, oh shoot, this is happening, and it's happening way earlier than it should.
I mean, I think that there is a level of like disbelief in that kind of situation because I had never heard of this happening. It was hard to even wrap my mind around the fact that it was happening, but I definitely, I was already grieving because I was already sure that my daughters would die. So sure, in fact, and I'm going to give away something that happens early in the book, but that when they came to ask me what I wanted to do, which in and of itself is just like insane that you're about to give birth 17 weeks and 2 days early, and they ask you, what do you want to do? But my husband and I actually decided we were going to sign a DNR, that we were not going to resuscitate because the picture that the hospital they actually do things differently now, but back then, they were required to give us the facts as we make that decision. And the facts were that there was a high possibility that the girls would have neurological deficits, that they might have disabilities. We wouldn't know if they would be able to walk or talk or feed themselves. And so they have to tell you that, because you can't just make a decision on like false hope. And my husband and I decided very, in this very like sad way, it was just us in this room on the antepartum floor. I mean, I remember it so vividly. Is it like, why are we going to do this to them and to us? And we asked for a DNR, but it never came. And when Vivian came, so suddenly I hadn't signed a DNR, and the neonatologist, which that's a whole other conversation that maybe we will or will not get into, the difference between like what a neonatologist thinks about this and what an OB, right? OBs are not baby doctors. They only deal with the babies when they're inside the moms, right? So
how did I not know this? I feel like, okay, so yeah, I feel like I didn't know that.
An OB does not, like OBs deal with babies when they are inside,
right,
not on the outside. A neonatologist does. And so the neonatologist that arrived when Vivian was born said, I will never forget like this. Like, I just see his face. He said, what do you want me to do? And I said to him, you have to save her. And he said, okay, I'm going to try. And so it wasn't like, if we try to save her, she could have disabilities, she could have this, she could have that, which is, even as a mom now, like on this end of it,
Mm-hmm.
I realized that, like, if my daughters had not, needed a walker, if my daughters had neurological deficits that were severe, if my daughters, whatever it is, right? If Margot still had a G tube because she came home with a G
Mm-hmm.
tube, like that, I wouldn't be like, oh man, I really wish I'd changed my mind, right? My daughters have
Yeah.
really, really poor vision, and I'm like live in constant fear of blindness. And but I wouldn't go back if one of them or both of them went blind and be like, oh wow, I really wish we hadn't intervened, right? But you don't know that before you've ever had
Mm-hmm.
kids. Um, like you just don't understand that whatever ways they may not fit in with society aren't really going to matter to you, because you're going to love
Mm-hmm.
them like so big no matter what. But you have no idea, and you're going into this decision about whether or not you're going to intervene, not having any clue as a first time mom.
Yeah, it's so weird how society has trained us mainly through pop culture in ways to like believe that we should have this sort of like awakening of grand love the moment that the child passes into the world, passes from your body into the, it's like a light shining down. And you hit on something that I think all motherhood or all mothers relate to, which is like it's not a light switch. You don't have the instinct of being a mom until you're a mom. And what is admirable about how you've been able to like sort of look in retrospect at your story is how you've been able to like sort of uh, make every mom, regardless of how she brought her kid into this world, sort of relate to that sort of transition. It's like you don't just become this like, oh, now I'm a mom. And it sometimes takes time, and you had to go through that in a very sped up way. It does seem to me, and I know you talk about miracles in your book, that was a small miracle that DNR did not arrive in time. And you have a whole sort of moment or several moments in the book where you talk about your relationship with God and your belief in God after this experience. And I'm curious how that has changed since not only that particular experience, that like God wink, as someone may call it, but the overall journey that you went through.
Yeah, I talk about it a little bit throughout the book, and it's interesting that you bring up this topic because there was part of me that felt like a lot of pressure for this to be like a religious book. I am a Christian, but I couldn't like bring myself to that point to write
Mm.
about it through that lens, because it is so complicated. Like, you don't, people who, well, I don't know. I can't speak to anyone else's experience actually. Like, faith is not like ever unwavering, like whatever kind of faith you have. And I have this, like, those situations, like the one we experienced of trauma, or where you have so little control, it like makes you crave, at least me, that something is in control, right? But I went through these waves of like, well, if something else is in control, a miracle is possible, anything is possible. But then I also went through these like dark, deep, ugly places of like, this is so, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on here, but
Cuss, please.
this is so fucked up, right?
Yeah.
Like, why is this happening to me? Why did somebody else's baby die? Like, this
Yeah.
is just like, how could I ever believe in a good God when things are so bad? And so I like wrestle, and I continue to wrestle with this sometimes, often. And I think what I have ultimately landed on to have peace, like within myself, is that we are human, and if we are going to believe in miracles and things that are divine, we have to like accept that we're human, and we're not going to be able to explain it. Otherwise it wouldn't be faith, it wouldn't be mysterious.
Do you still believe in God? I know that's like a crude way to ask it, but
No, I do. Yeah. um
does it
I
feel
don't
harder?
know.
Like, does it feel harder in some ways? And I don't want to give away too much of the book either, but there is a moment, I don't think this is too much of a spoiler alert, where you talk about a set of parents with a baby in the NICU who went to dinner and their baby passed while and you're in there thinking the same thing you just said to me, which is, my God, how could this happen? Why their child? And why
And
did
it
I
almost made
get
me
spared?
more mad because to give
Yeah.
away some of the book, like to give away even more of the book, that was a full-term baby. So it
Mm.
almost made me more mad because I knew like this mom, like I knew my kids were not going to be well when they came out weighing 1 pound each, right? But this woman, like she birthed a full-term kid, right? And so I was almost more angry about that than I was about my own kids.
It made less
Like in
sense
that
to you in
moment,
some
it
way.
made less
Yeah.
sense to me.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I don't know where that mom is today, and I don't know if like what that like how that shaped her life and how that shaped who she became. What I know on like about myself is I love the person I became because of this. Um, like I know things about myself that I would have never known if the girls hadn't been born so early, if we hadn't spent 7.5 months in the NICU, if I hadn't had to advocate for them. And even though I would not like voluntarily sign up for another 22-weeker, I wouldn't take it back.
Who are you? Who are you that you didn't know, that you didn't meet before this experience?
I am like, there is a level of resilience that that anybody cannot really uncover about themselves
Mm.
until you have been through something like this. If you had told me in July of 2019, when I found out I was pregnant with twins, that they were going to come 17 and a half weeks early and that I wouldn't know if they were going to live or die and that they would be cut open and their guts would be taken out and they would, like it, that one of them would literally code, like her heart would stop and she would stop breathing and we wouldn't know if there was brain damage or not for weeks. Like if you had told me that, I would have said to you, Sunny, I'm not going to survive that. Like I
Mm.
don't like I but I like did way more than survive, right? Like I raised these girls, and they're almost 4 years old, and they are bilingual, and they can identify the letters of their name on the refrigerator, and they like love every kind of ethnic food under the sun, and they like skip and jump and flip and repeat my cuss words back to me, and like I like did that, and I would have told you I couldn't. Like I would have told you I wouldn't have made it. And there were for sure times that I thought like, oh my gosh,
Right.
I'm going to die, not them. Like I'm going to die.
I'm like crying. So yeah, I mean, yeah, we have reserves of strength in us. And whether it's that type of experience, and I know I've had one too, where you're like, holy shit, I'm a badass, right? It's cool to hear you say that. I want to read just a little passage here while we're on the topic of faith. And I think this really summarizes my view of whatever the all powerful is. And it's just so well put in your words or poetry. So I'm going to read it. It says, miracles are big, wondrous acts of God. Miracles are also excellent doctors, G tubes, and broad spectrum antibiotics. Suffering is inevitable, but it can be a catalyst for a beautiful perspective. God is big and complicated, and we will never have him all figured out. It's just so well put. And coming from a person like me who is a massive control freak and whose big lesson in motherhood, as I've said multiple times, is digesting the lesson that I'm not in charge. Shocker. Reading that spelled out in black and white was like the reminder that I needed,
Yeah.
so beautiful.
I mean, I very much feel like that sums up kind of where I landed, that if I had two choices, which was to either like let go of this idea that I had to know it all and that I had to have God
Mhm.
all figured out, or just like let go of my faith. It was one or the other.
Mhm.
Like I couldn't, there was not another option for me. Like I had to land in the unknowing.
Hmm. Can you speak to parents who might be in the midst of that experience right now? And it was over 100 days, I know, between both of the girls that you were in that NICU on a almost daily basis or daily basis between.
Yeah, it
I know
was
Vivian got out first.
220. Yeah. So 226 days total, like from when Vivian was born to when Margot was discharged.
Wow. Okay, so speak to that group right now. Maybe there's someone listening who is that person or knows that person.
Everyone's journey is so personal. I mean, that's true in life, but the way I had to handle it to not lose my mind, and mind you, I will preface that with like, I did eventually lose my mind. I just waited until I got home and we were out of the NICU to lose it. But I had to take it as like, this is my normal now. So if this is the way, like, this is the way that I get to parent, because they could have died at birth, right? But they're here. And so I'm going to live like they're here for as long as I get the opportunity to live like they're here and take it. They even told us this, like 1 minute, 1 hour at a time. Because if you are looking at, and I feel fortunate that we were in the NICU 7.5 months, because I have friends now that I'm involved in this community who like will be in the NICU for over a year, right? So you have to take it one day at a time, because if you start thinking in months and years, like it will, it's so discouraging. And as I say that, like, it's okay to be discouraged, right? It is okay to be discouraged. It's okay to be pissed. It's okay to hate everyone. Like, I actually think that's a pretty normal, healthy response to dealing with this situation of like living in a hospital with your child, whether it's the NICU, or I have another dear friend whose daughter was treated for leukemia for years, and they were in and out of hospitals. Like, you embrace whatever your process is, and then like tell the people around you, like, deal with it. Like, I hate everybody, deal with it. This is hard, deal with it. Like
You sound like me when
you're,
I'm PMSing. Yes, I just hate everybody. So that's all you
but
need
it's
to
like
know.
you're,
Go away.
yeah, that's it. And it's like, the thing is, at that stage in your life, like when
Yeah.
you are in something like this, you are not responsible for anybody else's feelings. And
Mhm.
like, everybody else needs to realize that.
And did your husband, I know your parents were very present as well as his family. Um, what did they do to, I don't want to say like walk on eggshells around you, but did they like, what is something that a caretaker can do to show up for someone in that position?
The best advice I ever have is just do. Like, don't say anything. There is
Hmm.
nothing right you can say in the world when somebody is hurting like that. Like, no words are going to fix it. So tell them you love them, and then send them food or gift cards or elaborate, insane gifts that say like, okay, here is what, I am thinking of you, right? And it doesn't have to, I mean, elaborate gifts or baking cookies or dropping off a casserole. The most meaningful things, the most meaningful ways that people showed up for me were always like giving something of themselves, whether it was a
Hmm.
service or a gift or just coming and sitting. And it takes a special person to do this. Like, I don't think anyone can. So if you're uncomfortable with silence, this is not your calling. But like, my friend Asha came and she sat and she's like, we don't have to talk. And she just
Yeah.
sat. But there's just, I think the most important thing is like, just don't say anything, because you
Yeah.
don't know what that person is experiencing. And so something that could be perfectly acceptable to me might be like very offensive to somebody else who's dealing with it in a different way. And there just are not words, which is a lot coming from me as a words person, but there just aren't. So say
Yeah, isn't
nothing.
that funny when that happens? I'm a words person
Yeah.
too, and I'm only learning in my old age that sometimes the answer is no words. Just shut up, Sonny.
Yeah.
Yeah. You talk in the book about what you call the messy middle, which is like, that part of our journey where we don't have the neat lesson tied in a bow at the end of the road. And it's not the beginning where you're dealing with the shock, but it's that middle. And and it's where people might forget about what you're going through, or it's the time in grieving when the surprise of it all is over and people are back to their lives. How do you look at your messy middle? Your messy middle was long, with over 200 days being back and forth at the NICU. So how do you look at that now, and not from a point of survival, but from a point of growth?
I think now I can see that there was a lot of goodness in that messy middle. It requires a certain level of self-reflection to look back and say that in the middle are when the relationships were built, right? Because those doctors and nurses and respiratory therapists who took care of my daughters for the better half of a year, those relationships that I still have with them, my kids are almost 4, were built in the middle. Right. And the place where I learned how I was going to take care of my daughters with their diet, and the place where I understood what the implications were of their prematurity. And I was able to really commit myself to understanding their diagnoses. It was in the middle. But I only, and there's so much beauty and power that I took from that, right? Being there in the middle that was hard and boring and felt never ending was why I know everything I know now about periviability and prematurity and gut health and eye health and and I can only see that though because I wrote this book and I really reflected on what I took away from that time.
Did you keep a journal or anything during the process?
So I did not. I mean, I did and I didn't. So I took pictures because I really couldn't will myself. I mean, I was in a bad place, like mental health wise, much worse than I even realized at the time. And so but I knew I would want to remember. So I would take pictures and I would write down, like I have all of these journals, but they're not journals. They're like single words and then like pictures that go with those words. So I was able to piece together those, the story and the things that I didn't necessarily remember vividly from like single words that I jotted down in combination with pictures. But I couldn't, as a journaler, I just couldn't bring myself to like relive the crappiness every day. I'm like, I lived it once. I don't need to write it down and do it again.
I love how, and this could be just like going back and sort of rewriting what you remember of it, a factor of that, but you had fun nicknames for the doctors and the staff, and you joke about how your love of medical dramas carried you through and how it gave you a knowledge of some terms that you otherwise wouldn't have been familiar with. So there's like, I guess for anyone who's listening and curious about this book, I really want to emphasize the levity, the moments of levity that you managed to bring in, which is really awesome. Even so far as breaking down some of these complicated medical terms into their Latin roots and explaining, there's a little portion before every chapter how you talk about these complicated terms and break down what they mean. So it does seem that the Laura in there, the funny, kind of maybe hanging on to the light moments was still in there, a flicker during this time.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like a running joke among a lot of my friends who have dealt with any kind of trauma with their kids, be it NICU or otherwise, is that like there's this level of kind of dark humor that you need just to cope. And I think part of me was like a little bit nervous because it's a serious topic. And I was like, well, this is the reality of how I coped with this, is like, there were jokes, and that wasn't just in retrospect of writing it, but like there was levity in those, like in that room. I mean, I can say it. I mean, I don't know. It maybe is in poor taste, but we even joked about like Margot being like the Walking Dead because she coded and then they brought her back.
Oh my
and
gosh.
like when she started walking.
Absolutely, yes.
So you can joke about it then. But Yeah, you have to, right? There has to be like everything about your perspective shifts when you're in this like constant state of trauma, and
Mhm.
without any humor, like how are you going to navigate it? And then your idea of what's funny gets kind of twisted when you're in this like constant state of trauma. But I think it worked.
It
It
works so
really
well. Can you like tell us a little bit about like there was like The Godfather, there was
the possibility
the
doctor.
possibility, the gigantic hands. What was his name?
Oh, the surgeon, behemoth hands.
Behemoth hands. Okay.
Yes, there was a surgeon who had hands. Literally, the first time he operated on my daughters, like his hands were larger than my daughters, and like it's the only thing I could remember was like he's sitting across from us talking about how he might open them up and find there's nothing he can do, and so they're just gonna die. And I'm like, how is he gonna open them up with those enormous hands?
That's funny. Oh my gosh.
Yes, but everybody's nickname kind of evolved. So I didn't call them those things when we were in the
Sure.
NICU. It evolved based on my relationships with them over the 7.5 months.
How are the girls? I mean, like I know you said they're 4 now, and
They'll be 4 in December.
before in December.
Yeah.
And I mean, bilingual, eating all the foods. I feel like my kids could take a few notes from that. But how are they? I mean, how is it? You've gotten through. I hate to like be that person who puts the neat, tidy bow on it, but in many respects, you've
I
gotten
got the
through.
bow.
You got the bow. Oh my
And
gosh.
sometimes that makes me feel guilty because not everybody gets the bow. But I'm also like, I'm not ashamed of it. We worked really hard to get to where we are, right? We were in physical therapy for 2 years, and we did occupational therapy, and I really committed to the food thing.
Right.
But they are as four can be. I was just at Whitney Palmer Hospital. I will sometimes go back to share our story with like philanthropic groups that come through. And right before I dropped them off with our nanny, they told her that they drank wine for breakfast because I took them to pick out a gift, like a toy for themselves, and they picked these plastic mermaid wine glasses. And so they were drinking milk from a wine glass, not wine, obviously, like before something bad happens to me. But that's like the stage of life we're in where they will like, I have to be careful because they will give their interpretation of what's happening at home to anybody.
Oh yeah. Wait till you get in a bathroom stall and they ask you, why do you pee out of your butt really loudly? Because when you hover, I mean, the question, I'm like, can we like work on our volume control? The things that kids say.
We are definitely in that stage though of like, why? Who gave you your name? Who gave me my name? Who gave the spoon its name?
They sound like your true soulmates with the love of language though. I love that.
For sure.
And I just am asking you this as a mom because I need this advice. How did you get them bilingual or approaching bilingual? Is this just constant immersion? I know both of your parents are from Cuba, so you're Cuban, but like how often do you need to be talking to your kids in a different language to have it stick? I just need that advice.
We took the one parent, one language approach.
I love it.
So
okay.
I only speak to them in Spanish. My husband does not speak Spanish, so he only speaks to them in English.
Okay.
And like my parents, they think my parents don't speak English. My parents absolutely do speak English, but they think my parents don't speak English.
Oh my gosh.
So my parents and I, and my aunt is who nannies for us. So my parents, my aunt, and I only speak Spanish to them. Like if they speak to me in English, I'll tell them like, I don't understand. Can you say that to me again in Spanish? So that's how we did it. Now Spanish is their dominant language, and they actually did not start speaking any English until they were like 3, which was really funny and complicated with like my husband and my in-laws, because they would just like the same way that we might sometimes like inadvertently just talk louder when somebody doesn't understand us. Like the kids would do that to Jared and to my in-laws in Spanish. They would just talk, they're like louder Spanish,
slowing it down. Hold on. Oh, that's hysterical. Okay, so immersion is the only way, huh?
It really, and even then, it's like really hard. I mean, I've been reading about it because it's so important to me. Like we've got this far that they're almost 4, and Spanish is their dominant language, but you have to like keep it going. So like I'm gonna homeschool them with help from my mom and my aunt for VPK and probably kindergarten to like really solidify the Spanish, because typically once kids go into an English speaking school environment, it gets much harder.
You're just going to have to be only speaking to them in Spanish forever now.
Yeah.
And your husband will just be left out in the dark, and then it's on him.
He's trying. He's trying.
Okay.
He's like, on his like 900th day of Duolingo, and
yeah,
it's going the way you would expect it to go.
Yeah, sure. I wanted to ask you too, what is like, now that you're, I hate to keep kind of going back to this, put a bow on it, or like when you're in this, but what the lessons that you've taken from this, right? And you have had an ending that you have every right to relish. What do you do to help moms who might still be stuck in their messy middle or their messy beginning?
With the beginning, I just feel like you have got to just let it ride. I mean, I just do not think no matter what version of motherhood you're in, right? Whether you're adult, like 22-weeker babies or a full-term kid, that you're just like, wow, this is not what I had in mind. You just have to like not judge that first year or two, because it's an adjustment, not just like, yes, you have this other human that you have to take care of, and like, things are not balanced because hashtag the patriarchy, and like, all right, there's that piece. But then there's also like your body. If you are the person who birthed this child, and sometimes even if you're not, I mean, I have a friend who adopted, and she dealt with like a version of postpartum depression, because you have this like build up, and then you're like, oh, this is what I got. Like, not a disappointment, but like, it's not what I thought it was going to be.
No judgment here, girl. No, it is a very what?
But then like, if you did birth your child, you have like the issues with your hormones, your body's not what it's supposed to be. Like, you cannot, there is no wisdom. There's just like, ride out that first 2 years and then like be self-reflective about like what you took from it. And then I also, for me, I just think I chose what my priorities were going to be. And so if somebody were looking to me to say, like, what am I going to do with my messy middle, or my happy ending or my unhappy ending? It's like, all right, well, pick what really matters to you, because not everything can matter. You'll lose your mind if you want your kids to have like the best education and the best food, and to like be bilingual, and to dance tap, and to be in a mariachi band. Like, you have to pick what matters to you.
Yeah.
And then also for it not to only be what matters to you with regards to your kids, but like your purpose. And for me, because of the twins' prematurity, and they were immunocompromised, I stopped working. When they came home from the NICU, it was not planned, like, but I was also delusional to think that I was gonna go back to work after twins right after. But anyway, it wasn't planned, but it was more than I could handle, and I realized it right away. And so I stopped working. But I needed to find like purpose for myself outside of just being a mom, especially because like I was 33 years old. I wasn't 21,
right.
And then that's a different experience too. And so I started writing again, and I really found like a cause in this community of peri-viability, where I like have decided to be a voice for that community and to partner with people who are doing big things in that community.
I love that. Can you share too, if you had any particular like supplement program, or like, I feel like you're a fellow like crunchy mom a little bit. I don't know if I'm getting that vibe. I heard the ancient grains line in the book, and I was like, she's my people. This will not be considered medical advice, so everybody listening, right?
But I have a marketing degree.
Yes. Okay. Right. Creative writing and drama and marketing. Don't listen to us, but do listen to this answer. Just because I'm curious. I'm big on, what we can do to supplement kids' health, and especially because your girls had challenges in the beginning, and I know you were concerned about building their immunity and building their systems. Is there anything that you've loved supplement or food wise, even that you've seen some changes with?
Yes. Okay. So first of all, there's a doctor. I believe on Instagram, he's the Gut Health MD. He's a gastroenterologist. His name is Will Bulsiewicz.
Oh my
and
gosh, wait,
cyber
stop.
fueled.
Yes, he was brought up by, oh, yes. I interviewed this company, Methodology, and I believe he sort of helped them develop their line of food, right? Like with an intention
Okay.
specifically to
He's
gut health.
amazing. Okay.
Yes. Oh my
So this
gosh.
is
Okay.
life changing for me. And I touched on this in the book. Like, I had a friend who sent me a podcast interview where he was being interviewed, and then it led me down this rabbit hole. But essentially, like, to make this as simple as possible, the twins got a lot of antibiotics so that they wouldn't die. They were necessary, but they wiped out their gut microbiome. So they already had gut issues because they had gut surgery, and then they had more gut issues because their microbiome was wiped out. And so I really felt like Dr. Bolsewitz's work gave me like at least something I could do, because I, like you, Sunny, have control issues. So I needed to do something, right? So I committed to this. It's very, very plant forward, right? And my kids didn't have they've never had meat. They had fish for the first time, like last Thanksgiving.
Wow.
But no, they didn't have dairy until they were like 2, and I started introducing it in small amounts, because it doesn't do the gut any favors, right? And I did introduce stuff in small amounts just to make sure they didn't have allergies. And I did this, I really feel like I need to preface this, under the supervision of a pediatric gastroenterologist. I did not do this like as an experiment that nobody knew about in my basement. I live in Florida and I don't have a basement.
So we did it in the kitchen instead.
Right.
I'm just kidding.
But it was under the supervision of their physician. So that was the first piece. The other thing, which their physician was on board with from the start, is probiotics. And we did a lot of research, like in collaboration with their physician, because I'm sure you do know, because I just listened to both of the interviews you did, the weight loss ones, where we talk about how things are not regulated by the FDA. And so I'm not going to give my kid like some probiotic off the shelf at Target. And so I did some research on the ones that had like real life bacteria, and that was like naturally found, found in nature. And I asked her doctor if it was okay, and we went with that. So those are the biggest things.
What was the brand of probiotics? Are you comfortable saying?
We use, I want to say it's Ion
Bio. Yes, girl. Bio. It's the liquid one.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I take it and squirt it into my kids' mouths every morning.
Yes,
they're
my
like,
girls take it. It actually is what made the most difference. I mean, not medical advice, but please pick up the book so that so all of this makes sense to whoever's listening. But the middle section of the book is called Diarrhea Diaries. Like every part is labeled. My second born, I'm sorry, Margot, if you listen to this when you're 25, or if you read the book, sorry that I'm talking about you like this, but she literally had like explosive diarrhea for a year after she came home. And the things that have made the biggest difference are making sure that she gets plenty of fiber, which, by the way, green plantains are a natural anti-diarrheal. So
how do you prepare them?
I literally just boil them and put salt, and you have to peel them. Peel them, boil them, and then put salt and lemon juice on them. But they are a natural anti-diarrheal, and so between that and the probiotics, we were able to wean Margot off of her anti-diarrheal, which she was like a year old, and she was having an adult-sized dose of Imodium like 3 times a day. So this is like a big deal that we were able to get to that point and wean her off. But so those were the biggest like health things that I took like for my kids' gut health. And then we are like we're super hardcore, and I don't judge anybody, but we are like hardcore. Like they got no sugar until they were like 3.5. And even then I'm like, very, very rarely do they get anything with sugar. I have a cookbook, which is called Good and Sweet. The whole cookbook is made with only naturally sweetened ingredients. So like dates, things that are attached to their fiber. So I'm sure you know that like sweet things that are naturally sweet and have their fiber with them, so not juices, which are stripped of their fiber, are like better. Like they're actually fine, right? They're no detriment. if eaten in normal quantities. So the book Good and Sweet is all baked goods that are made with naturally sweet ingredients. So like if I'm making a cake or if we're having family dinner, like I let my kids have dessert. I don't want them to have food issues. Like that's not what I'm going for.
Right.
But I try really hard to make sure that it's anti-inflammatory, good for the gut health. Everything is nourishing, rather than just like substituting things for the sake of not having sugar, like actually creating foods that are nourishing and delicious has been my objective with feeding them. I love talking about this because I'm like, it's been so healing for our family. And so not just for my kids, but for my husband. And like for me, I'm like have such a great relationship with food because I'm not scared to eat anything that's in my house. So yeah.
You are also my people because there was a part in the book. Well, first of all, because I already know all those products, like in the stuff you mentioned, and I'm like, oh, this validates me in a way. But also, there's a moment where you talked about Botox toward the end, and anyone who listens to this podcast knows I'm just a raging superficial bitch at times. I care. I don't want to care about my wrinkles, Laura, but I do, and I think about how the dialogue of society at large has put me in this position where I have to care about the next face cream because my identity, society tells me, is tied up entirely in how I present to the world. And I know that's not true, but there's this little part of me. So anyway, there's a part where you were debating getting neuromodulator injections, and like you go through the same exact process that I do every time, which is, what am I showing my daughters and my son when I do this? Do I really need to do this? Who is behind my desire to be wrinkle-free and smooth like porcelain? And I will circle the drain for a good 2 months before and I'm currently in that cycle. And I'm like, yeah, right. So did you do it? Did you get the Botox?
Well, I had done it before, and that was like in the book I write about it is like I'm due for an appointment, and I just like go back.
Did you go back?
I haven't like
okay.
But then I like told my husband like 2 days ago, like I really need to like look at this. So I'm like, yeah, but I'm like no judgment about it because I understand I understand that like we have this society, like the societal pressure is not made up. The societal pressure is real.
And there is like a real instinctive desire to be like pretty. That sounds so fucking retro that I hate myself, but I want to look pretty, and I'm like not scared of that. But I've done stuff to myself and my body. I'm not embarrassed of it, but it is a constant dialogue. I tell myself, why can't I be normal girl who just gets her face shut up and walks away and is like, oh, that made me feel good. I have to go through this whole like self-flagellation every time, and then I'll talk about it. I'm just not normal like that. And I saw you. I was like, I
think it's more normal though than like I think it's more normal than people want to talk, especially once you have kids, because everything that you do, you're modeling for them, right? Yeah. And so I think it is normal. And I also think like that's a healthy conversation to have with my kids when they're old enough, is like, hey, if you want to do this and it is safe and you've researched it, like that's cool. But I also want you to be self-aware and self-reflective enough to understand like why you're doing it. And that in the end, we're all going to get old, like no matter how much shit we inject into our face. So
damn it. No, yeah, you're right. It's good. We like age. Listen, I'd rather get old. The other option is not
yes.
Great. So, okay, wait, really quickly before we go, Laura, I have to ask you the question that I asked the parent, like mother or father of all twins, which is, do they have a cosmic, like ESP level bond? Do you see them like finishing each other's thoughts?
They are like each other's people for sure. I don't know about like the whole ESP thing, but they like, you can tell they've never been separate. Like they've never been separated other than those like 3 months between NICU discharges. And it shows because if the other one's like not in the room, they're like, where's Margot? Where's Margot? Or like the idea of like going somewhere with only one, they say you should do that with twins. Like that one parent should go take one out. They're like, no, that is not happening. So they definitely are each other's people. And they don't need to say a whole lot to communicate with each other.
I love that. I love that so much. Laura, when does the book come out? Where can we get it? And where can we follow your writing, which isn't just available in book form, but it's also online?
Yes, correct. So I write a newsletter called the Diarrhea Diaries. This is a subscription-based newsletter where I write 2 essays a month. So if you enjoy the book, you will definitely enjoy the Diarrhea Diaries. The book is available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, or Bookshop.org, which supports local bookstores. You can also go into any bookstore where you prefer to buy your books and ask them to order it, and they can. And you can also follow along with some of my other writing at laurahere.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura, so much for taking the time to talk to me today and break down your journey. And guys, you do have to get this. And here's what it looks like. It's called
November 7th. I don't know if I said that.
You
November
did
7th
not say
is when
it,
it
but
comes
no.
out.
And that's what it looks like. Oh, wait, one more thing. Dying over the captions on the back.
So, Sunny, those were supposed to be a placeholder. And when I sent the early copies out, I got nobody cares what I'm doing on social media, but I've never had so many positive comments in response to what I put on the back of that book that I just decided to keep it.
It is insane, guys. It's the blurbs. You know how like other authors will get an advanced copy of the book and they'll be like, "Oh, Laura's a genius writer," which you are. But it's from my favorite one is from Brother. It says, "Are you sure you want to publish this? Once this is sitting on someone's bookshelf or in their garage, there's a chance they may actually read it, and it's a bit dramatic." It's hysterical. I love it. I love it. Your sense of humor comes through in like really profound ways, even when you're in some really dark moments. So I cannot encourage people to read that book enough. Laura, thank you again for spending some time with me today.
Thank you so much, Sunny. It was truly so much fun, and I love your show, so it's an honor to be on it.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys if you've been watching or listening. As always, this is the call for those ratings and reviews. Take a minute, pop open your Apple Podcasts feed, scroll down, tap 5 stars, leave a rating, and know that I will be virtually hugging you from afar if you do so. Thank you again for watching and listening, and we will see you next week on We Gotta Talk.